There is a moment in every great company's life when comfort becomes the most dangerous enemy. Picture Nissan in the quiet hours before dawn. Showrooms dim, the echo of assembly lines still in the bones of the factory, and a boardroom where leather chairs lean back against polished wood. The cars outside gleam with decades of reputation, reliability, engineering pride, global reach, but inside the accounts, small cracks have begun to spiderweb. Numbers once taken for granted now twitch like warning lights on a familiar dashboard. Listen to the low murmur behind closed doors. "We can cut corners here," an executive argues, tapping a spreadsheet. "It's temporary, volume will fix it." Across the table, a finance chief stares at projections that refuse to cooperate. He whispers, "We're borrowing from growth, not building it." That whisper ages into a pattern. A deferred maintenance of strategy, a reliance on short-term fixes, decisions justified by past success until the math becomes undeniable. Outside, in service bays and sales floors, employees feel the air shift. Skilled technicians notice parts delayed, dealerships sense incentives bending, and loyal customers wonder why the pieces they once trusted show signs of brittle assembly. The cultural confidence that carried Nissan through expansion has softened into denial. Pride hides panic. Pride rationalizes risk. This episode is not about villains or melodrama. It's a study in how a chain is broken not by one strike, but by repeated, small bends. An acquisition that didn't integrate, an ambitious target that encouraged risk, debt piled on optimism. We'll trace the arc from comfortable dominance to the edge of collapse, watching how strategy and finance short-circuited one another until the company teetered. I want this to be practical. Before we dive deeper, tell me, what's your biggest pain right now? Are you trapped in debt, paralysis and procrastination, or a cycle of bad decisions? Comment below. If this resonates, a like helps others find the lesson. And if you want to follow how collapse became comeback, subscribe and join me as we walk into the choices that nearly destroyed everything and the hard reckoning that started the turnaround. Next, we'll unpack the first missteps, the quiet compromises that turned warning lights into a crisis. The story deepens not with a single dramatic moment, but with 1,000 small compromises stacked like unstable bricks. Picture the gleaming executive tower, glass catching the morning sun, a floor-to-ceiling city view where strategy memos are born. Inside, a soft-spoken finance chief says to the CEO over coffee, "We can defer these investments one more quarter." The CEO, tired but confident in scale and brand, replies, "Do it. We'll catch up when markets rebound." That exchange, banal and logical in the moment, sets the tone. A hero's comfort that makes it hard to imagine collapse. Across the river, the factory floor tells a different story. Fluorescent lights hum, conveyors pause to be fixed with temporary metal straps, and line managers exchange grim looks. A foreman mutters, "We used the cheaper supplier. It held, until it didn't." Workers patch problems with ingenuity, but ingenuity can't replace structural stability. As debt quietly accumulates and corners are cut, the balance sheet begins to look like an unsteady bridge. It holds in fair weather, it creaks in storms. Customers notice in subtle ways, less consistent fit and finish, delayed launches, fewer innovations. Dealers, once proud ambassadors, start to grumble in backrooms. A veteran salesperson, voice rough with years on the lot, tells a young colleague, "This isn't the Nissan I joined. We're surviving by patchwork." Those words carry weight because they come from people who live the brand every day. Finance teams scramble to hide shortfalls through accounting maneuvers. Strategy teams chase fast wins with flashy, undertested models. The two halves of the company stop speaking clearly to each other. Culture, once a quiet engine of excellence, frays. Meetings tilt toward blame instead of diagnosis, and decisions grow reactive. The big lesson here is practical and painful. Denial compounds error. Small, apparently sensible cuts and choices, repeated without root cause thinking, produce systemic fragility. If any of this rings true for you, maybe you've papered over problems in your own work or life, please tap like and share your experience in the comments. What small decision is snowballing for you right now? In the next segment, we follow the moment the cracks become visible to everyone. when leaders can no longer look away and the real, painful reckoning begins. A turning point that will define whether collapse becomes comeback. If you want to see how tough, disciplined choices rewrote Nissan's fate, stay with me and subscribe for the next chapter. The room smelled of stale coffee and printer toner. Fluorescent lights hummed above a cluster of men and women who had spent decades building a brand now laid bare by spreadsheets. On the wall, a projection blurred department after department with red numbers swallowing green. For months, the company had played at optimism. Product launches with glossy ads, leadership tours with smiling handshakes. But tonight, the veneer cracked. Someone pushed a stack of market reports forward. A young finance director, voice steady though his hands shook, said what everyone had avoided. We're out of runway. Incremental fixes won't stop this. Silence is its own verdict. You could feel it in the quiet exchange of glances, in the weight of old reputations pressing down. Memories of hallways lined with trophies and framed patents clashed with the present. Plants running below capacity, models cannibalizing each other, dealers offering desperate discounts. The abyss wasn't a single failure. It was the sum of choices made to protect comfort. Too many platforms, too little accountability, a culture that prized consensus over candid truth. Then the pivot happened, not as a cinematic revelation but as a pragmatic, painful litany. A veteran executive stood up and, voice flat with exhaustion and resolve, laid out the plan. Close plants that bled cash, stop projects born from ego, sell non-core assets, and impose strict pay for performance. Cut what hurts, she said. Stop protecting sacred cows. The language was surgical. People argued, then argued less. Decisions were signed in that room with trembling pens. Hard choices that would cost people jobs and reputations, but preserved the company's nucleus. Beyond numbers, they attacked culture. Weekly performance reviews turned into real conversations. Middle managers were given clear metrics and real consequences. Engineers who had been isolated were put back on the shop floor to see the dense customers actually complained about. Leaders walked the assembly lines without aides. Trust was rebuilt through transparency. Discipline through visible accountability. It was ugly, unforgiving work. But for the first time in months, nervous smiles replaced hollow ones. They had stopped denying the truth. They had chosen to unmake comfort to save the future. In the next chapter, we follow the first full year after those decisions, the immediate fallout, the hard human cost, and the surprising mechanics of a comeback that would rewrite what success meant for a company that had once teetered on the edge. If this moment resonates, give it a like, share your biggest challenge below, and stay with us for how the recovery truly began. By the time the meetings ran past midnight, the factory floor was quiet except for the intermittent clank of a lone robot and the hum of ventilation. A soundtrack for a company that had to learn how to listen. The reckoning began not with a dramatic speech but with a handful of brutally honest conversations. Engineers pointing at spreadsheets, line managers naming problems they'd long been forbidden to mention, a CEO saying, "We will stop comforting ourselves with hope and start measuring truth." That moment changed everything. Cutting what hurt meant more than canceling projects. It meant admitting which models bled margin, which suppliers added hidden cost, which meetings were theater and which decisions required pain. They closed plants that cost more than they produced, consolidated platforms so designers could focus on quality not novelty, and renegotiated debt with the same precision an engineer used to adjust a tolerance. Each cut was surgical, not reckless. Rebuilding culture happened in the spaces between metrics. The cramped break room where a senior manager began asking younger technicians for direct feedback. The plant corridor where a foreman who once feared confrontation started saying, "Tell me the problem now." Discipline replaced blame. Daily targets were visible on whiteboards. Teams owned outcomes. Leadership walked the line, not the press conference. The comeback wasn't instant. It was a long, cumulative accumulation of small victories. Fewer defects, steadier cash flow, a model that returned to profit. The public narrative celebrated the turnaround, but the real hero was the steady, almost boring insistence on fundamentals, honesty, focus, and relentless execution. For anyone watching this who feels a similar snowball forming in their life or business, the lesson is practical. Identify the root error, Stop amplifying it, cut what truly weakens you, restore disciplined routines, and rebuild trust through small, consistent wins. Which of these steps feels hardest for you right now? If this story helped you see one next step, give it a like so others can find it, share your challenge in the comments, and subscribe for more clear, real-world lessons from the automotive world and beyond.